Welcome to another edition of Preaching Pointers. In this little video, I just want to think for a moment about the purpose of sermon introductions. As the name suggests, the introduction should introduce your subject or theme to your audience so that they have an idea of what you're going to be talking about and where you're going to be heading in your sermon. But I suggest that the introduction should not simply just introduce the subject, but another important part of the introduction is that it is used to grab the attention of your audience. That you give your audience, you give your congregation a reason to want to listen to your sermon. You grab their attention. You're persuading them that you have something from God that is worth listening to. And so your introduction should be delivered in such a way to raise that interest in your listeners. Now, in a congregation, in an audience, there'll probably be those who will listen regardless of whether you provide a good introduction or not. They are convicted about the importance of the Word of God and will listen to it whether you give them that good introduction or not. And that's not to say that that's an excuse for poor introductions, but there will be people who will make that effort to listen regardless. But there will be others potentially in your congregation or in your audience that, unless you grab their attention early on, will drift or potentially just switch off and not listen anymore. And it doesn't matter what good stuff you might have coming up later on in your sermon. If you haven't grabbed their attention in the beginning, they'll have switched off and they won't be listening when the time comes to hear the good stuff that you've got later on in your sermon. So when you're thinking about putting your sermon together, give thought to the introduction. Give thought about how you're going to introduce your subject. But just as importantly, give thought to how that introduction will grab the attention of the listeners and give them a reason to want to listen to your message right through to the end. Thank you again for taking time to listen to another edition of Preaching Pointers.